Hi everyone, my name is Connor. I'm part of the Becoming a Doctor team. I'm one of the project leads and the ambassador leads at the Becoming a Doctor organisation. Today we've got a great session lined up. We're going to start off with Louise Cox from the BMA, who's going to give us a brief introduction to who the BMA are and how they're going to be able to support us as healthcare professionals and particularly as medical students. At 4 o'clock, we're then going live with Dr. Kieran Walsh, who's going to be giving us an amazing presentation on getting published. After that, 5 till 5:30 for the Becoming a Doctor ambassadors, we're going to have a closed session. So members of the Becoming a Doctor team who are watching this live, remember to join using that link that we've sent you out. And those of you who are not yet members of the Becoming a Doctor team, remember that you can sign up to become an ambassador and get access to all of this great content through the Becoming a Doctor website. So without further ado, Louise Cox, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Connor. Hi all, and well, thank you to Raj and the team for having us along today. Welcome to my short presentation that outlines how the BMA supports you through medical school and in particular your final years at medical school. My name is Louise Cox and I'm one of the BMA's membership managers. I actually cover the east of England, but there's another 7 of me around the country supporting doctors and students on a local level. So who is the BMA? The British Medical Association is the trade union and professional association for doctors and medical students in the UK. The BMA was set up by doctors for doctors, and we have collective bargaining rights, which we use to negotiate the national contracts for all doctors. When we sit around the table with government, they listen to us as we represent the profession in vast numbers. The MSc, which is the Medical Students Committee, represents medical students in the UK, and we consider and address issues of importance to students and make sure that your views are also represented in wider BMA policy. We continuously fight for the profession locally, regionally, and at a national level to help improve your working lives and provide you with the support that you need to work to the best of your ability. We also offer employment support and career advice to our 160,000 members. Regardless of where you are in your career, the BMA is there to help guide you. So now I'm going to take you through the BMA's top membership benefits for students. Firstly, being a member of the BMA allows you access to the BMA Library. It's the biggest medical library in Europe. If there's any UCL students on the session, you're probably aware that during normal conditions, you can use our library facilities as a study space. So if you're ever in London, drop in. And before COVID, the BMA offered a free postal service to all members up until the end of FY2, and will resume when we're allowed to do so. At the moment, if you want an ebook and we haven't got it, our library team will try and get it for you, so you can email them if you need to. And also, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, you can borrow up to 12 books at a time from us for a minimum of 3 months and a maximum of a year, which I believe is more generous loan out terms than any university, and no penalties if you return the book late. And we all know how expensive medical textbooks can be. You never need to buy one again with the BMA library. I was also told by a Cambridge uni student a couple of weeks ago that it's worth joining the BMA just for our ebook collection, apparently. You can also access over 22 million journal articles, research services, ebooks, e-journals, anywhere, anytime. And our guys in the library really have supported so many students through their finals. And you can use our guys as your search engine. Another important membership benefit is the world famous British Medical Journal. If you're a final year medical student and already in membership, you can now upgrade to the full BMJ if you haven't already done so. You'll receive the journal every week through the post, or you can access the digital version if you prefer. And if you join during your final year at medical school, you'll automatically be upgraded to the full BMJ. As part of your free BMJ learning subscription, you get access to thousands of clinical e-learning modules. There are useful courses both for exam revision and for completing your e-portfolio when you begin your foundation years. There's a few bullet points on here that outline some examples of the courses. You can build your knowledge with our interactive website, including audio and video modules to help you learn in simulated environments. You can keep up to date with practice change and developments with one of the world's largest and trusted online CPD providers for doctors and medical students. And you can also print and download certificates, proof of your learning. The BMJ also provides support for your non-clinical skills. You can access courses that help with medical CVs and career planning, and also make sure that you hit the wards running by completing our courses on workload and time management, effective handovers, building professional relationships, and giving and receiving useful feedback. And we also provide courses on interviews, presenting and negotiating skills. And you can use your BMA login to access all of these courses. Other key student benefits include discounts on the Ask Dr. Clark revision classes, facilitated by Dr. Bob Clark and his expert team. They are the UK's most popular revision courses. We can also help with planning and organising electives and practice questions and online resources to help with your SJT. Another extremely important thing to know is that the BMA offers a counselling and peer support service. The doctors and medical students are humans too, and whether it be exam stress, anxiety, relationship issues, there's always somebody that you can talk to. You can access our wellbeing team 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you're on your first placement or newly qualified and don't know who to turn to, the BMA can always help. You can speak in confidence to a fellow doctor and a BMA member who's been trained in peer support. Specialty Explorer, we launched this last year. As a student member in any year, you can access this new online tool, Specialty Explorer, and get help with making an informed choice about your specialty. It's an online psychometric test which takes about 20 minutes to complete, and it asks all sorts of work-life balance questions. It supports your research into medical specialties and provides you with a really detailed report, a personalised report, listing your top 10 specialities according to the answers that you've given. It's quick, it's easy to use, and it covers all the specialities in the UK. This is an example. These are screenshots of when I did the test myself, pretending I was a doctor. You get 20 pages all about how the application works, and then you get your top 10 specialities which match your answers. It will ask questions about how important location is to you, earning potential, if you prefer a hospital or a community setting, and even how competitive you are. It also asks if you prefer your patients to be acutely ill or chronically ill. And as you can see, according to my answers, that I should have been a psychiatrist. So just to recap, if you're already a student member, or when you do join us, we strongly recommend that you register your BMA account online to access all of the benefits. You'll receive emails from us that keep you informed on political updates, guidance, and resources. And you can also follow us on social media for instant updates and all the important cost bits. BMA student membership is actually free. If you join now, you won't pay any fees until October 2020. So it's really good that we've got this opportunity today to tell you about the BMA summer offer. So as I've just said, if you want to take advantage, if you want to join the BMA and take advantage of this offer, we do this every year to boost numbers, simply because the more members we have, the stronger we are and the greater our negotiating powers are. If you'd like to join us and be able to have a say in your chosen profession, then simply visit the link on this presentation. It's bma.org.uk/join5600. And you can also follow me personally on Twitter, as well as my colleagues, and BMA students have a Twitter handle as well. So that's a very quick run through of the student benefits. Thank you, Connor. Do you want to stop
Great, thank
sharing?
you. Yeah, thank you so much, Louise. That's really useful. I know I signed up to become a member of the BMA students at my Freshers Fair, so I've been one for the last 5 years.
Fantastic. Music to my ears.
I think we had a quick question. I think we had one question come in during your presentation.
Okay.
We've just had a quick question. How do I connect my BMA account and my BMJ account if I'm already a member of both?
I think you log on, or you register an account with BMJ, and you link up your BMA ID number, which is your BMA membership number. You have to link them together. But if you struggle at all, just ring the BMA, because our guys at the end of the phone are experts in talking people through this. I would need to be able to do it on my screen to tell you properly, but yeah, if you go onto the BMJ, you do need your BMA membership number, an email address, I believe, for it to recognise you.
Great, thank you so much. That's really useful. I'm sure lots of people will be affected by that. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah,
thank you.
Ben.
Okay,
thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
So that's the BMA. If you haven't already, please do go and sign up and join the student BMA. As Louise said, it's free effectively until October if you sign up now. So I'm really pleased now I can introduce Dr. Kieran Walsh. Hello, Dr. Walsh. Dr. Kieran Walsh is going to be presenting our main part of the webinar today, how to get published. I'll hand over to you.
Hi, Connor. Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. It's great to be here, and I hope people find this useful. If anybody wants the slides, they're very welcome to have them. And if anybody has any questions, we'll run through some slides, but hopefully we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. And I'm sure there's probably a chat functionality for slides. So I'm just going to share my screen now, first of all.
Just to check, Dr. Walsh, would you like to do questions at the end rather than questions throughout?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Yeah. So everyone watching, please do keep commenting with your questions. And at the end, we're going to be having a Q&A session with Dr. Kieran Walsh. Just a reminder for anyone who is already a part of the Becoming a Doctor team, we're having a closed session after this at 5. So make sure to check your email and join that session. And for those of you who are not yet a member of the Becoming a Doctor team, remember you can sign up to become an ambassador for the Becoming a Doctor team on the Becoming a Doctor website. So that's becomingadoctor.org.
Okay, great. Thanks, Connor. And I hope you can now see my slides, my screen. Connor, sorry, can you confirm?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to give a brief talk on this subject, and I'll probably talk for half an hour or thereabouts, so lots of time for questions at the end. And this is exactly what I'm going to talk about, how to write a paper that editors will want to publish. So why get published in the first place? Well, there's lots of potential reasons, and here they all are. To say something important, to share your work, change practice, educate, to quote, read from the BBC, to inform, educate, or entertain, maybe to even to market your service, all of which are valid reasons. What do editors want? Well, depending on the journal and depending on the editor, they might want a range of different things. They might want content that's important, papers that are important, that have real potential to improve decision making. They might want originality. Certainly they want clear writing. They want content that's relevant to their audience, relevant to their journal. And of course they want a wow factor, but a wow factor only comes along every once in a while, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think certainly importance and relevant to the journal. So you must read the journal that you're planning to submit to, so you know that it's that your paper will be relevant to the journal. And ultimately, to get published, I think to boil it all down, to drill down, you want something hopefully that's original, an original piece of work, something that's important, and of course something that's academically rigorous. But even more important than these things is to get published is you need to write. So there's a 1980s film called Throw Mama from the Train, and it's about somebody who's writer's block, the writer who has writer's block, and it's all about that. But suffice to say, if you don't write something, if you have an idea or do some work, and if you don't write it up and then submit it to a journal, you definitely won't get published. So I think one of the first and important lessons is to write and to submit it. So, and I would say to start writing at the start of your project. So often I meet people and they're part of the way through a research project or some kind of a quality improvement project or something that they hope to get a paper out of at the end. And I ask them, how's the writing going? And they say, I'm going to leave that to the end. And I think that's not a great thing to do. And it's potentially dangerous because they could run out of time at the end. They could end up in a busy clinical job at the end. So I say always start writing as you go. And if you're doing some kind of a research or quality improvement project, then you can write the introduction at the start. You can write the methodology as you're doing it because your methodology won't change. You can even start to draw out the skeleton of your results so that you can add the results in at the end. So much better to get going, I think, and start putting literally pen to paper and start creating your article as you go. I know that takes a bit of discipline, but it's really important. So when writing a paper, a few kind of key tips. First of all, read the journal. It's obvious when a paper is submitted to a journal and the person hasn't read the journal, doesn't know who the readership of the journal is, doesn't know the type of articles that the journal accepts. So read the journal. Read the instructions for authors and read them repeatedly. And if you're not too sure, ask the office. They should be able to reply. But most of it is there in the instruction for authors, which will be on the homepage of all journals. Many journals have a rapid reject zone. So if you submit a paper to a journal and it's completely in the wrong format, not the type of paper that they accept, if it's a review article and they only accept original research or whatever, then you're not going to get accepted. So you can't emphasize, it's really important to read the journal. And then choose the formats. So we always think how to get published, it's always going to be how to get research published, but actually there's a range of different types of papers that you can get published. I won't read these all out, but the principles are the same. And indeed, I think that often it's too ambitious at the start of somebody's career when you're a medical student or foundation year doctor to say, okay, I'll get a piece of original research published. So why not start with something much smaller, a short report or a case report or maybe a poster and or even a letter to the editor. Start with something small before you take on something much bigger, I think is better advice. And so when you're writing a paper, you're eventually going to submit it. And so what should you concentrate on? What's the first thing an editor might look at, and what might they look at next and after that? Because those are the things that you need to concentrate on, because ultimately, if you don't get over that kind of first fence, then your paper won't get published, and first impressions count. So when writing a paper, you should really think about the title, you should think about the cover letter, and you should think about the abstract. And those things are really most important. People might spend a massive amount of time on their paper, and then at the end they'll say, oh, at the end, when they've kind of exhausted, they'll write the cover letter and write the abstract. But actually, many papers are screened on the title, cover letter, and abstract. And if the editor doesn't really kind of rate what you've done in those three things, then they won't get as far as reading your paper. So it's really important to concentrate on those things. And so in the cover letter, do say in your cover letter, if your article is original or important or academically rigorous, do say it. I would say write the cover letter probably before you write your abstract. Spend a little bit of time on it. And it's amazing, some people don't write a cover letter at all, or they say, please find attached, or they might say, this is a first draft, or they'd ask, would you be interested in a paper like this, which is not really what an editor wants to hear. An editor expects you to say that this is suitable for your journal and it's important work and it's academically rigorous. And when they hear those words, they're more likely to say, okay, well, I should at the very least send this for peer review. Think a little bit about the title and look at the types of title that the journal accepts. And it might be all of these options: descriptive, declarative, journalistic, questioning, and copy. There's no one right way of doing it, but copy the type of title that the journal typically accepts. Often that will be in the instructions for authors as well. And I've got a preference for journalistic type titles, so you can see the one at the top. Welcome to Yob UK, or it could be misinterpreted as, you could have a very long title. 25% of boys, depending on how they interpret our questionnaire, admit to getting up to something that isn't nice or a bit thoughtless or sometimes nasty. Other than that, we can't really say in the evidence available. So I'd say also keep titles reasonably short. Then you get into your abstract. You got to stick to the word count in your article overall, but also in the abstract. If you don't, you may end up being in the rapid reject zone. Use active voice, spend time in it. If there's a suggested structure, which might be the IMRAD structure, introduction, methods, results, discussion, follow it. The 80-20 principle, or the inverted triangle of news, is probably most important. If you read a news article, everything is in the headline, so everything should be in your abstract, and editors should be able to read the title and the abstract and have a good idea of what they're going to get from the rest of your paper. And so this is really re-emphasizing the same points. Sometimes often the only part of the study that will be read. Editors may screen papers by reading only the abstracts. And so the abstract may be in the IMRAD structure, introductions, method, results, discussion, or it may be in this format, which many journals take as well. But regardless of the exact structure, just follow the rules of the journal. And there's lots of content up there, and I can't get through it all in 30 or 40 minutes, but there's lots of resources out there to help you get published. Here's just one of them. It's a BMJ resource called Research to Publication, and it follows through all the steps needed, from thinking through an idea through to navigating peer review at the end of the process. So I'll be continually mentioning resources that are available and that you should look at throughout this talk. And that's just one of them. And so another resource is the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, recommendations for manuscripts submitted to biomedical journals. It's freely available. The Equator network has reporting guidelines for research, so how to write up your randomized controlled trial according to concert criteria, or your quality improvement report according to SQUAR guidelines. It's really, really important to follow these guidelines when writing up your paper, and say in your paper that in writing up this quality improvement report, I've followed SQUAR guidelines. And the editor will automatically think, oh, this person must have some idea of what they're talking about. And here's the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. And so most papers, not all papers, but most research papers follow this IMRAD structure: introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So let's kind of run through these various sections over the next few slides. So introduction should be reasonably short, 3 to 4 paragraphs max, outlining not what's known, what's not known. Don't write too much, and then end it by saying what the research question is and why this question matters. Then methods. It should be like a recipe, and it's a most important section really for readers who are informed and follow the reporting guidelines. For example, the consort statement in the case of randomized control trials, and describe how you did it in as much detail as possible, albeit within the word count. And if it's a randomized control trial, use recognized methodologies like, say, PICO structure. I won't talk through PICO. Editors expect the study design to be the best one to answer the research question. So I've mentioned randomized control trials a lot, but of course, sometimes it might be an observational study that would be best placed to answer the particular question. So map your study design to the research question. Here, and this will help you to do this. So always look at the Equator network. There's a massive amount of free content available there. It will help you to report correctly your case report, which should follow the care guidelines, your systematic reviews, which should follow PRISMA, etc., etc. It's all freely available, so there's no excuse not to write things up correctly according to recognized international guidelines, which all the journals and journal editors will recognize. And so the Equator network is available online. State what your statistical methods are, and in a short talk, it's way too much detail to go into this. I'll just mention that. And obviously, the ethical aspects of your methods, do state them at the end of your methodology section. Then we get on to results, and obviously report results fully and honestly as pre-specified in your methodology, which was drawn up before you even started your research study, and report primary outcomes first. Consider whether secondary outcomes are relevant at all, but certainly concentrate on primary outcomes. Give confidence intervals, essential statistics. Importantly, don't start the discussion here, just straight present the results. But then at the end, you can have a discussion, which should include a statement of principal findings. Obviously, the strengths and weaknesses of your study, best to point them out yourself before somebody else points them out, and what your study might add to the existing research, and why that's the case. And possibly at the end, unanswered questions and future research. But I'd go easy on that. People kind of, it becomes a bit of a cliche that for future more research is needed in this field. I wouldn't kind of overemphasize that. And so these slides have been put together by various people at the BMJ down through the years, and I think the original version was led to me by Dominic Macaulay, who's a former editor. And on the left here is the Book of Kells, which is a very ancient book, and which is the Bible, but it's been transcribed by monks in the west of Ireland. And when they were bored, on the left-hand side, they wrote notes as to what their experience of writing was like. So they're saying, the ink is thin, oh my hand. So we know writing is hard work. And in the discussion, we've put these little bits here, which are sentences you probably never read in a published paper, even though we would love to read them from time to time. The best one, I think, is the shortest one. So the results are just okay, or I'm only doing this just to get tenure. So transparency declaration, this is important. BMJ and most medical journals now require authors to state in each research paper that this manuscript is an honest, accurate, transparent account, etc., 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 that we haven't omitted any important aspects, and that we've explained any discrepancies from the study as planned. So moving on from studies to writing, and so there are important rules about writing, but to summarize them in one sentence, it's to keep it simple. So use simple, straightforward, accessible language. Sometimes you might be doing a really specialized piece of research, and you've got to realize that the readers of the journal won't understand all sections of the research. Even sometimes the editors or peer reviewers, unless they're super specialists in your area, they might not understand all the technical language that you're using. So keep it simple. Use short words, simple sentences, active voice, take out words, edit it back. Never use the passive voice when you can use the active. Use everyday English, straightforward words. So, and avoid cliches, things like that. So we all get tired of reading papers that say things that like, I read with interest, or one can reasonably assume, or it is well known that, or more studies are needed, etc. So avoid things like that. There are no prior published studies of this topic. Is that really the case? Very rarely is that the case. And so this comes from Kipling when he describes the skills of telling a story: what, why, when, how, where, and who. So think about those words when you're writing up any paper, I would say. So this is, once again, a small section of the talk on writing. So use simple, straightforward sentences, simple words. In scientific writing is almost the opposite of that. So if we were to put this in a medical journal, it would be the feline of the species was circumnavigated by the canine, or whatever. Just use simple, straightforward words. Editors will appreciate it. And so I'll actually skip this. I might come back to it at the end if people have any questions about it, but it's an example of kind of over convoluted writing. People recognize it's from Dan Brown. I can't remember which book. But I might come back to that at the end if we have any questions about what I mean by good writing. And similarly this bit, but I'll move on now. But anyways, simple, short sentences, one idea per sentences. Several short, simple sentences are usually much clearer than one long sentence. Active voice. Try and use precision in your writing. So don't say a disease is common or rare. Say what the incidence or prevalence is. If reporting on diagnostic tests, use these phrases: false positive, false negative, positive predictive value, sensitivity, specificity, or whatever. Don't say it was a good test or an accurate test. State exactly what you mean. Similarly with treatments, don't say treatment is effective. Say what the absolute risk reduction, or the number of needed to treat related to that treatment might be. And then before you submit, review it, read it yourself. Make sure your co-authors read it and all sign it off. So if you've got co-authors, everybody needs to sign the paper off, not just the corresponding author, the first author, or the last author. Send it to expert colleagues, or indeed non-expert colleagues, just to have a quick read of it to make sure that it all makes sense, because often it will be people like that who'll be looking at it and deciding whether it's fit for publication or not, or people like that who'll be peer reviewing it. So they often have insightful views. And then it's time to submit, and give yourself time with this. Get everybody's details beforehand, so your co-authors, titles, job descriptions, places of work, etc., because you'll all need to enter them into the manuscript submission system, which might be Manuscript Central or something else. And it's hard to do it the first time, but the system will recognize your details, and the next time you're submitting a paper to that journal, or often that group of journals, it will recognize you, and you won't need to fill in as much kind of demographic details about yourself as you did the first time. Then what journal to choose? So think about, it depends on your paper and who you're trying to reach. Is it journalists or specialists in the UK or international? What impact, or what are you trying to achieve? Is it to get published in a high impact factor journal? Is it to get people to read your work, or to debate it, or what? So think about those questions when deciding on what journal to choose. But I won't go into any detail, into much detail for this, because there's so many journals out there. And then eventually you'll submit. And then the thing to do then is to wait and be patient. There's no point in a week or even 2 weeks after submitting your paper saying, are you going to accept my paper or not, or whatever. It'll take at least a few weeks if it's going to go through peer reviews. And after a while, maybe you haven't heard back after a month or 6 weeks, it's reasonable, I think, to make a polite inquiry, but not really before that. And then you'll get a decision, and the decision might be good news. Yes, we're going to accept your article, but even if they're going to accept, they're likely to ask you to tweak a few small things. And if they do that, then reply quickly. The answer might be maybe. It might be, we may accept your manuscript with major or minor revisions. And as much as possible, try and make those revisions if you can. Sometimes there might be suggestions of changing your methodology or things like that, which you won't be able to do. But there might be suggestions that you should tone down what you've written in the discussion or things like that. Those are certainly you should be able to do, and it's worth really considering them and following the guidance and being as quick as you can. Sometimes you'll get refusal and a no, and at that stage it's important to think about, well, what other journal, should I appeal to that journal? And some journals you can appeal and get a second or third or fourth peer review, but sometimes you won't be, and then you just got to move on quickly to another journal. There's different types of peer review. There's open peer review, where everybody knows who everybody else is. There's double-blind peer review, where the author doesn't know who the peer reviewer is, or vice versa, etc., etc. But you just need to follow whatever guidance. Importantly, the peer reviewer advises, but the editor ultimately decides. You will get peer review comments back in your paper. Try and respond to them on a point-by-point basis, accepting them and stating how you've changed your article, or maybe refuting them and saying you disagree and why you disagree and why you want to leave your paper the way it is, or whatever. I would advise people to volunteer to become a peer reviewer for a journal. Journals are always looking for peer reviewers, and it will get you insight into the process of medical journals. So it's really worth considering that. How to please editors and peer reviewers. Once again, make sure the message is clear. Cite closely related papers. Send previous peer review reports if they're relevant. So you might be asked, if you're submitting to a second journal, whether you submitted it previously anywhere else, and you can be open and say yes you did, and here are the peer review reports from that journal. Importantly, communicate clearly and promptly. And this is the peer review process, and this is the one for the BMJ. And as you can see, goes through lots and lots of different processes, from screening, external peer review, internal editorial meeting, until eventually acceptance. And here is a graphic demonstration of the peer review process of medical journals from Gary Larson. I think most scientists regard the new streamlined peer review processes as quite an improvement. And I think we're in the last couple of slides now. So I mentioned this, do volunteer to become a peer reviewer. And certain journals do allow appeals, and if you address criticisms, there's a chance that your journal ultimately might get accepted, but you're only allowed one appeal, at least at the BMJ. So it's, if you are going to do, make it good. And I think we're on the last one or two slides now. So what do you do if your paper is rejected? Well, I would say don't give up. Think about what's the next journal on your hit list. Some publishers, including the BMJ, when you're submitting a paper in the first place, they'll say, well, you plan to get it published in the BMJ, but if the BMJ isn't interested, would you like us to directly resubmit it to one of our other journals in the stable of journals, like BMJ Open or Postgraduate Medical Journal or whatever? And so it's worthwhile thinking about that, because then you don't have to go back to the start again to the manuscript submission process. The salesman's game is all about not giving up, really. You should be thinking, oh gosh, not that my paper has been rejected, but actually I've learned something from that process. I'm gonna have a better paper now, having learned from the peer review and the editorial comments, and now I'm gonna be in a stronger position when I knock on the next door, and when I submit to the next journal, and I'll be in a much better position to get published. And so that this is my absolute very last slide. And we should acknowledge the various editorial people, including Trish Groves and Donal Macaulay, who put together different versions of these slides down through the years. This is my email address, KieranWalsh@bmj.com. Do please get in touch if you have any thoughts, and I'm very happy to take any questions now. And I am now going to see if I can stop sharing. So now I think I'm now stopped sharing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Kieran Walsh. That was really, really useful. We have quite a lot of questions who've come in. So we'll start off with the earliest ones that were submitted. So we've had a question here. So as an aspiring medical student, can I still get published if I present a fully researched article?
So I think that anybody can get published, in short, a medical student or more senior people. But my advice would always be to learn how to walk before you can run. So start off with a short, simple, straightforward article, maybe a letter to the editor, maybe a case report, maybe a personal opinion or something like that, rather than going full in with a 10,000 word randomized controlled trial, which is really difficult to do without a big team and infrastructure behind you and funding, etc., etc. So absolutely anybody can get can get published, and all should try. But I would start with the more modest and simple projects.
Great. So definitely that's not yet being a medical student is not a barrier to publication, but you may find it difficult to be achieving that level of academic writing.
Yeah, sorry, I think I might have misunderstood the question. So this is somebody who's not a medical student.
This is an aspiring medical student, so someone hoping to become a medical student.
Okay, yeah. Well, absolutely, yeah. So that's a big ask and an ambitious thing to do. But if you've got a personal view or something like that, I think there's or you see something in a medical journal and you disagree with it, there's no reason why you can't write a letter the same as everybody else.
Great. So we have a question about a bit more about the kind of editorial process. So after a paper has been accepted to a journal, can edits still be made before it is then published?
Yeah, so usually when a journal accepts a paper, any journal, usually they will make some edits to it, or they'll request you as the author or the authorial team to make edits to it. And there might be small tweaks, minor revisions, and they may make edits to it themselves to make sure it's in the correct style of it, but they'll ultimately send it back to you, send the proofs back to you for approval pre-publication. So do always check the proofs, which is going to be the final version of their article, and make sure that the meaning hasn't been changed, that the substance of your paper is, and indeed the details of your paper is still the same. And there will probably be queries in the proofs, and so it's worth checking those queries and answering them, because they might ask you to clarify things before you get to the final version of the paper.
Great, thank you so much. That really clarifies a lot. We've got quite a long question here and quite a specific one. So, if my paper is funded by an external organization and that organization has influenced the outcomes of interest, does that reduce the potential for publication?
So I think that the best way to do things is funders should be separate from the editorial research process and editorial process. So an example, a funder might be NIHR or a charity or a trust or a foundation. They should be giving a research grant or an educational grant in an unrestricted way, and they shouldn't be interfering or influencing the outcome of interest. So that really shouldn't happen in the first place, and it should be clear, and funders should have rules, and research institutes should have rules to ensure that doesn't happen.
Great, thank you. And I think along the kind of similar lines of that first question, we've got some very specific questions coming in from people asking what are their chances of getting published. This person's asking as a grade 13. We had another question from a grade 12 student.
Sorry, kind of just to clarify, these are people still at school who are planning.
This would be school people doing the equivalent of A-levels, but internationally. I think they're just wondering whether that's going to be held against them, that they don't hold an official title. And I suppose they're also, I would assume people would also be wondering if that's going to be helping them in their application to medical school.
Yeah, okay. So I think, yeah, if you're applying to medical school, if you can get a publication under your belt, so much the better. It's going to help. Now, I think that at that stage, if I was on a medical school admissions committee, if I saw any publication at all, I'd be pretty impressed, frankly, never mind a publication in The Lancet or BMJ or something like that. It could be a very simple publication, maybe even a poster publication. But once again, if you're not in medical school, it's difficult to take on big projects. You're not really going to be able to write up a case report because you won't be seeing patients. You're not going to be able to do research without the infrastructure behind you. So think about what simple things you can do. Maybe write a letter, maybe write an opinion piece. And I think those things should be within the capability, and think about what journal you might submit it to. So this the student BMJ, which often accepts articles. But I think that at that stage, any publication that you have to your name will impress the interviewing committee. It should, I think.
Great, thank you. We have a question here. So, what is the best way to pick a journal to submit an article to? Should we consider the impact factor or the submission requirements?
So I think there's no straightforward answer to that question. Obviously, you want to pick the journal with the highest impact factor in the relevant field, but with the caveat that the higher the impact factor, the more difficult it is to get published into. So it's very difficult to get published in the really high impact factor journals like New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, BMJ. The submission requirements shouldn't really be an issue or a barrier or something that should influence you. That they're all reasonably straightforward. Like, it's just a matter of working your way through the manuscript submission system and entering data before you submit it. I think it's much more about what your paper is about, and does the journal accept papers like that? Is your paper an editorial? Does the journal accept editorials? Is your paper a randomized controlled research trial? Does the journal accept that? And then, is your paper a super specialist, where it will be of interest to a super specialist journal in, say, pediatric neurology? Or is it much more general journal where it's a postgraduate medical journal might be more interested, or the BMJ might be more interested? So I think it's answering questions like that really are more important than impact factor submission requirements.
Right. So it's your article itself that's more important than the journal that you're submitting to when you're thinking about which one to.
Yeah, sorry, Connor. Yeah, and it's the type of article as well, and then the type of articles that the journal accepts. So BMJ Open, it's an open access journal, but it takes research and systematic reviews. It doesn't take editorials. So you shouldn't be submitting your editorial to a journal like that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We have a very relevant question here from Amara Khan, who's wondering about the costs involved with submitting a paper for publication.
Yeah, so this depends really on whether a journal is open access or is more traditional closed access model. So if it's a closed access journal, then there'll be no charge for submitting a paper and getting it published. If it's an open access journal, that means it's free to read and find the papers for the readers. But the journal has to get funding in some way, and so it gets funding from the institutions where the author is based, who's then submitting the journal. So sometimes there is a cost if it's an open access journal. It's important to check that and to read the instructions for authors before you start kind of formatting your paper or then submitting your paper, only to realize, oh my goodness, their publication fees are required here and I don't have any publication fees. So it's important to think about that first.
Thank you. Nishita Gadi has asked, if an article has been rejected from a specific journal, but then since the rejection, revisions have been made, are you able to resubmit to the same journal, or do you need to move on to the next one in your list?
I think that if a journal has, well, first of all, I'm not too sure revisions can be made to the scientific aspects of a paper, because if you've done a research article, say, you cannot change what you've done. It's done now. You can change bits about the discussion or the conclusions that you've drawn, but you can't change the substance of it. And I think there's no hard and fast rules in any of these things, but I think it's time, if you've it's been through a peer review process, it's been rejected, it's time to move on to another journal.
Okay. Raj has asked, should we now be encouraging all clinicians and students to involve patients as co-authors if we claim to practice patient-centered medicine?
So that's a good question, and an important question as well. So BMJ has led in this regard in encouraging authors and teams of authors to recruit to get patients involved in the writing up of their article, and the involvement might be everything from them reading the article, commenting on it, but ideally to have a more kind of a bigger role, a strategic role in advising on the research and ideally helping to write it up. And if they have helped to write it up, then they should be a co-author. Absolutely. So I would say yes to that question, and it may well help with certain journals which encourage that.
Great. Another question here from Raj. Should medical students consider running journal clubs to improve their skill sets? And if so, how can they do this? And have you got any tips for setting up a journal club?
Yes, so I would encourage them to do this. I think it's a really good idea. And they should do this, and it will help them learn about papers and will improve their writing skills and reading skills and critical appraisal skills as well. I think like any club, you want to share the workload out and meet once a week during the term, but have different people all the time doing the work and presenting the paper in the journal club. One tip I would give is to pick a paper, and it might be, say, a randomized controlled trial or a systematic review or meta-analysis or whatever, and then look at the equator network associated guidelines, and then look through the paper and say, well, does this paper follow the guidelines? Because that will enable you to kind of learn real insights as to the quality of the paper and share those insights as well amongst other members of the journal club. Like, I think sometimes discussions at journal clubs can be a bit superficial, what people say. This is an important paper or an interesting paper or whatever, but ideally your journal club should really give you kind of deep insights into the paper, strengths and weaknesses, and why those are as well. And I think that will improve your research skills and your writing skills too.
Yeah, I would also chime in there and say that writing responses or commentaries on articles that have already been published is also a fantastic way of yourself getting published and getting those publications in. And so if you do have a journal club and you're meeting once a week, and 10 of you or even 5 of you once a week can be writing a response to an article together, you can rotate which of you is presenting and which of you is writing that review. That is a fantastic way to get through a significant number of submissions, and it's probably a great way to start writing these academic papers.
I think that's right. One important thing in that regard is you need to be fast. So if a paper is published in July 2020, then you need to get your rapid response or your letter in there pretty quickly. There's no point in doing it way after the event, 6 months or a year after the event. So you need to kind of keep on top of the research base.
Yeah, and these kind of journal clubs are also, they work just as well over Zoom or whatever virtual meeting place you want to use. So don't wait until September if you're thinking about setting up one with your colleagues or friends. Definitely just start a weekly Zoom meeting or something like that, and you can start banging through some articles. And it's also a great way to keep your mind occupied and to keep up to date with current journals. We have a question here again about the submission process. So are you able to submit to multiple journals simultaneously, or do you have to wait until you've been until you have your outcome from your first submission to then submit it somewhere else?
Okay, so there is a definite answer to that question, which is that you're not allowed to submit to multiple journals simultaneously. You got to submit to one, wait for that outcome, and if it's not a successful outcome, then to move on to another journal. The reason why is because what if multiple journals simultaneously then accept your paper? What are you going to do then? Could it end up being published in multiple places, or will you have to say to them, sorry, no, I want to withdraw it from your paper and submit it somewhere else? So just one journal at a time.
We also have another question here regarding the kind of the time frame of submitting an article. So this viewer has completed a systematic review for their master's dissertation, but then it's then taking them some time to kind of convert that into a submittable form. Is there a time limit? Is there a point at which they're no longer going to be able to submit this or have it accepted?
I think it depends on the time and the time lapse, and also whether the field has moved on. So I think if it's a matter of a month after they've finished their masters and they still haven't submitted their systematic review, they're probably still okay. But if it's a year later and a number of journal articles have since been published in that area that therefore render your systematic review out of date in some way, then your chances of acceptance aren't so great. So I think the thing to do is to be prompt and to get along and submit it as quickly as you can. And that comes back to the kind of planning process at the very start when you're doing your masters and doing your systematic review, to start writing it up and getting it into appropriate form from the start, really.
Yeah, and I think it would also probably be worth putting in your cover letter the date at which the systematic review is up to, just to make clear for any editor reading it that your systematic review, for example, only went up to 2019 or something. If you're trying to submit it now, people need to know that, because they will take that into account when they're deciding whether to publish or not.
That's right. It'll be in the methodology anyways, but no harm to mention in the cover letter and be upfront about that.
I think you've already answered this, but just to clarify, we've had a couple questions about a couple more questions since your answer about whether people can submit to more than one journal simultaneously. We've got a question here asking whether, if a review article has been published by one journal, can that same review article be submitted to another journal?
Okay, so once again, this is an answer to which there is a question to which there is a straightforward answer, and the answer is no, you cannot do that. So if a review article or any other type of article gets published by a journal, then that's it. You cannot publish part of it or salami slice it or whatever, or publish the whole thing in another journal. That's self-plagiarism essentially. So it's not right, and the reason why is because it skews the scientific literature then. So an example, somebody a couple of years later might do a scientific a systematic review and find 2 articles on this subject, when in fact there was only really one. So you shouldn't do that. Connor, you're on mute.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes left. Then we've gone through all of the live questions. Please keep sending them in, guys. In the meantime, I had a personal question, a question from me. I've just finished my intercalation, and so do you recommend students who've done an intercalation and written a dissertation to try and work with their supervisors to adapt that for publication, or should that be something that people really are considering before they start writing their dissertation, to try and choose a topic which is going to be more able to submit for publication?
So I think in your situation, you've done the dissertation, as I understand it, kind of at this stage. So now you've got to think about, okay, well, is it something that a journal would be interested in? And if so, which journal? And is it realistic for me to reformat it and to submit it to a journal? And probably to state to the journal that this is based on a master's dissertation. I guess in the ideal world, the master's dissertation and the needs of the journal would be very much aligned. But it depends on exactly the subject of your dissertation, whether it was original research or a review, or whether it was about medical education, basic science, quality improvement, or whatever.
Great, thank you. I'm going to have a word with my supervisor and see if we can turn it around, because as you said before, there is also a time constraint on there, so you need to be prompt with that turnaround time. We've only got a couple more minutes before Dr. Kieran Walsh is going to be joining the Becoming a Doctor team in a closed session. So those of you who are watching who are members of the Becoming a Doctor team, check your messages and your emails for the link to join that chat. And for those of you who are watching who aren't yet a member of the Becoming a Doctor team, remember that you can still sign up to become an ambassador for Becoming a Doctor at the Becoming a Doctor website, which is becomingadoctor.org. Just before we swap over to that closed session, Dr. Walsh, if you could please, we've got another last question in, which is, does the reputation of the research group influence publication, or is it based solely on the merits of the paper?
So it should be based really solely on the merits of the paper, and depending on the peer review process. So sometimes there might be a blinded peer review process, so the peer reviewers won't know who the research group is. Sometimes it might be open, and many journals move to open peer review, so they will know. But it shouldn't really influence their decision. It should be based on the quality of the paper. Having said that, if you come from a really good research group, then that research group and institution will likely have the infrastructure in place to supervise you and to help you and to make sure you do really good research in the first place. And so that will probably have a significant influence on the quality of your paper, and so you're much more likely to have a high quality paper in the end, which is then much more likely to get published.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. I think we probably have time for maybe one more question, and I guess it's along kind of the same lines. So if you are asked to suggest preferred or non-preferred reviewers for your publication, how should you go about approaching this?
Okay, yes, so many journals, this is a requirement. And so I think the preferred reviewers, think about who else is knowledgeable in this field. Maybe, and you should know this now at this stage, having written a paper, or who else is published, and just suggest people. Ultimately, you're just suggesting, and the editorial team will decide who to send it to, and they may follow your suggestions, they may not follow your suggestions. You shouldn't suggest people who are in the same department of you, or people who are your best friends, or whatever you've done substantial amounts of work with in the recent past, because probably wouldn't be fair to do that. What about non-preferred reviewers? So I submit papers reasonably regularly still to other journals because I've got an interest in research and quality improvement and clinical decision support and medical education particularly, and often the non-preferred reviewers is an optional thing, but I never tick that because I don't see the point in it really, and I don't know why people would. I think most academics are too busy to kind of be to decide on the merits of, to decide on the merits or otherwise of a paper for not valid reasons.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this session. I'm sure it's been incredibly valuable to everyone watching. Just for those of you who are not yet members of the Becoming a Doctor team, I would like to remind you that there's going to be another and some more fantastic opportunities to learn how to get published, to learn how to write an abstract for your article, and that's going to be at the Virtual Health Careers Conference, which is going to take place on the 25th of July. It's going to be entirely virtual, and I'll hand over to Raj, who's the founder, to give a little bit more information about that.
Thanks, Connor. Thanks so much, Dr. Walsh, for that amazing session. I'm sure you've demystified a lot around how to get published and more importantly, the thinking that goes beyond that, more than just the FPass points that everyone here is probably worried about and the PubMed ID number. So thank you for that. And thanks to Connor for chairing the session and, bringing all the questions to the front. So thank you so much to both of you. And of course, the BMA for supporting this tutorial. Louise is always great at showcasing how the BMA can support you. And that's, where the BMA and BMJ both work together really to provide you with the support that you need to succeed in your career. So I thought I'd briefly mention the Virtual Health Careers Conference that's taking place on 25th of July on Saturday. We've got over 1,000 people signed up already, and stuff for aspiring medical students, current medical students, as well as current doctors and healthcare professionals. So it's definitely one not to be missed. We've got over 50 workshops and support from the NHS, General Medical Council, the Medical Schools Council, the BMA, Royal Colleges, and lots of great organisations. So please do sign up. It's totally free. It's going to be very interactive, and you'll also receive a certificate of attendance following it. And if you're a professional, a CPD certificate too. So that's all. That was my plug for the day. I hope you join. And I'd like to thank Dr. Kieran Walsh once again for his time today. And I'm sure the BAD team and the ambassadors are looking forward to asking you some more one-to-one questions around their research and some of the research we're doing at Becoming a Doctor too. So if you've enjoyed this session, please do consider joining up as an ambassador to represent your institution, your hospital on our website. Connor is one of our ambassador leads. And we're always really keen to make sure that we can develop, medical students, junior doctors, and allied healthcare professionals as leaders in the field. So thank you so much again, and I'll see you shortly in the next session.
Thank you, Raj, and again, thank you so much, Dr. Kieran Walsh.